Hi, welcome to this fundamentals discussion on tables. Tables, as you already know, are necessary for many reasons, so let's talk about how to get started with tables in Nitro. Just a quick explanation of what we're looking at here. We've got a couple of variables and methods pre-declared that we're going to use in this lesson, and we have a simple document with quarter-inch margins. One other thing I'm going to point out is that I'm including a file here with some data that we're going to place in tables. So I have some actor roll data and some wrench metrics data that we're going to use as sample data for this discussion. So let's get into it. To start with here, let's replace this scratch content and just see what a table is. So I'm just going to put table and a semicolon there. And we're going to press F1 on that. And we're going to take a look at the parameters for a table. So to construct a table, you can have no parameters at all. You can just put table straight out. Or you can include borders. The first border here is the border to go around the outside of the table. And then there's cell borders. So those are for the cells inside. And those can be declared at different levels within the table. So if all you want to do is make one setting for the whole table and they're all going to be the same, just do it right here in the table parameters. And then last but not least is this array of column classes. And so this is how we can set up our columns. Notice it's nullable, which means that if we leave it null, Nitro will set up the columns for us depending on the data that we put into the table. So let's go ahead and just paste in here some information and then discuss it. So here we're constructing a table with a 1 pixel border around the outside, a 1 pixel border on each cell, and then we have specifically set up 3 1-inch columns. And then we specified a single row. And inside of that row, we specified 3 separate cells. And in each cell, we gave it a run of data. So let's press F5. And we have exactly what we just described there. 3 cells with the content, each 1 inch. This is the basic structure of a table in Nitro. And even if you don't specify any of this information, this structure is going to be created behind the scenes by Nitro. For example, if I take out the cells here and I press F5, you're going to get the exact same layout because Nitro behind the scenes is going to create the cells. And it'll do the same for rows and even for columns. So let's take a look at another table. I'm just going to get us started here. I'm going to put a little separator in here just to keep these two tables apart. So we're going to make another table here. This one, we're going to give it a 5 pixel border around the outside. And then we're just going to add cell padding. So on the inside of each cell, we're going to have 5 pixels of padding all the way around. And then right now I'm just putting in one single row. That'll be the header row. Giving it a background and a text height. And then I'm calling this actorRolls.getRow. If you look over here in my actor roll class, I've got a single method here that just returns a revision. And the revision has in it these 5 elements, which each one of these is just a string. So those elements are going to be applied to this row. So we know that Nitro will turn each one of those into a cell. So this is all we need to lay out the header row for this particular table. So let's try it. Press F5. There we go. We got this big thick border around this header row, which doesn't look too good right now, but we need to add some data to it. So let's do that. Our data is this data here, this actor role data. So we're going to iterate over that data and very simply do the same operation that we did here, what we called get row. This time we're going to use a method that we pre-established up here, because we're going to use this again in another table. And here we're just making a row and setting up the properties for the row. So we're taking body row and we're revising it with get row for each one of the actor roles. So if we press F5, there we have it. We have a nicely laid out table with all of this character information. That shows that it's pretty easy to take content that's in an established data set somewhere and lay it out into a table. So we want to do this one more time, but with a little more specificity, where we're going to go into each cell and be more specific as we lay out the content. So let's do that. Let's just start by adding a table, and we're going to talk about what this table is doing. So we've got a thick gray border, which we've established up here. This thick gray border is simply making a new edge class with a 5 pixel border. And in Nitro, a pixel is 1/96th of an inch, just as it is in CSS or HTML coding. It's not an actual pixel size on the monitor. And then we're going to give it 80% of black here. So with 0 being black and 100% being white, we're going to give it an 80% color. So that's our thick gray border we're applying to the outside of the table. And then inside for each cell, we're going to add 5 pixels of padding all the way around. And then I'm going to create 5 columns with the right 4 columns being specifically sized, and the first column having this expand method being called, which we'll talk more about that after we lay it out here. So let's add a header to this. And for the header, we're going to call the thin gray border, as I described for the thick gray border, but this one just has 0.25 pixel size. So we're going to have a thin border here and the color white, and we're going to add in the header names. So we're going to F5 that, and that gets us started. Now we just need to add some content. Okay, so we're going to iterate over the wrench data, and for each wrench, just write out its information into a cell. Now notice I'm calling this wrench cell. That's because up here I've specified the wrench cell to equal a cell with a thin gray border all the way around it. So I'm going to press F5, and there we go. The content lays out into the table nicely. But we can go through now and format this up a little better. Since we've laid it out this way, we can get specific with each cell. So let's straighten out some of this content. To start with, let's reduce the size of all of it. So inside the row here, we're going to add a property, 9 points. And that's going to reduce the font size. And then let's make this first one bold. That'll call out the names. And then the millimeters and inches here, I want those to be centered. So we're going to add an H-align center to each of these. There we go. And the PSI, we want to show the commas in those. So let's add a text group of true there. And that is a better layout for our table. So now I'd like to talk about this expand feature and what the other option is there. So expand is doing as we already discussed, but let's talk about the other feature, which is fit, and we'll give it a size. The size is the maximum width that is allowed regardless of the width of the text. So it will size the cell to the width of the text up to the maximum provided here. So I'm going to say fit, I'm going to give it 3 inches. And 3 inches is pretty short, so it's probably going to wrap here. Let's press F5. And that's exactly what happened, is it reached the 3-inch mark and broke and made everything wrap. But let's make that larger. Let's make it, say, 6 inches. And 6 inches is much wider than what is displayed here now. So now what's happening is it simply is sizing this cell to the maximum width of the available content. And of course, we can use the expand feature to allow the table to size itself to the full width on the page, and then it will expand to the available space for that particular column. So that's a pretty good overview on tables and how to lay out a basic table in Nitro. Hopefully this helps you get started with this important formatter. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us on our Discord channel. You can find the link to the channel in the description box below. See you in the next video.